I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Democratic Republic of Congo to introduce an address by the head of state.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President, I have the great honor and privilege to introduce His Excellency Mr. Félix Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo, the President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Head of State, to present his statement before the General Assembly of our organization at its 75th session.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, I echo those speakers who spoke before me to congratulate you on your election to the presidency of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly. You have the support of my country. I would like to wish you and your Bureau every success in carrying out your mandate. I would also like to commend the remarkable job done by Ambassador Tijani Mohamed Bande, your predecessor, who, despite a difficult set of circumstances, was able to skillfully conclude the consideration of a complex and varied range of subjects. I would like to reiterate my country's confidence in the action and efforts that the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, has been undertaking since taking charge of our organization. Mr. President, we are holding this 75th session of the General Assembly at an extraordinary and particularly difficult time, marked by the coronavirus, a pandemic that has caused countless deaths, has upended our economies, and has hampered our efforts to reduce poverty, maintain international peace and security, guarantee justice and human rights, and promote social progress while protecting the environment. Faced with this global threat, each country has demonstrated great resilience and dug deep to find ways to raise public awareness and to protect its population, while also cooperating with the rest of the world, either to learn from the experience of others or to share with them the progress that they've made at home on this disease. When the first case of COVID-19 was detected in Kinshasa on the 10th of March 2020, my government immediately took swift, decisive measures to contain the spread of the virus. And given the severity and the highly contagious and deadly nature of the pandemic, I declared a public health state of emergency across the country, after having established a presidential task force and a multi-sector COVID-19 response unit. We've thus managed to build upon what we had learned from managing the Ebola epidemic to improve our ability to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, which were overlapping problems. To this end, the government established a multi-sector committee and a technical secretariat, which came up with a step-by-step plan to respond to COVID-19. In order to respond to the varied and complex challenges caused by the pandemic in the areas of healthcare, the economy and security, I instructed my task force and the government to work closely together to coordinate the development of a multi-sector emergency plan to reduce the impact of the pandemic, which is a program that I personally launched on the 18th of June this year. I would like to take this opportunity to express my full gratitude for the assistance given to my country by our partners at this particularly difficult time, and to once again ask for their support for the coordinated measures and efforts undertaken thus far by my government to combat COVID-19 and beyond. All this has allowed my country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to reduce the mortality rate from 10% in the first days of the pandemic to less than 2.5% today. Coherent multilateral coordination provided by the UN in general and the World Health Organization in particular has helped ensure true international solidarity, which is both efficient and effective, and helped promote greater cooperation with development partners and the international financial and economic institutions to mobilize the resources needed to combat the pandemic and to help developing countries strengthen their national health systems. The pandemic has shown us that there is just one planet and that our health and our fates are linked. For the Democratic Republic of the Congo, if we want to help developing countries emerge from the crisis and fare better in the post-COVID-19 period, the efforts of the international community should include debt cancellation and other methods of easing the burden of debt to allow them to build back better. We welcome the efforts of and the measures taken by the G20 and the international financial institutions to postpone debt repayment schedules, and we invite them to take other decisions with a view to cancelling that debt entirely. All of these measures to provide support or additional financing to developing countries should not come with any strings attached, nor should they be conditional on economic policy reforms such as austerity measures. I therefore appeal to the international community to bolster international solidarity, joint efforts, multilateral cooperation and partnership with all developing countries, including when it comes to capacity building and technical assistance to combat and defeat a disease that is our common enemy, and to show that we are able to work together in solidarity. I therefore acknowledge the leading role in these efforts of the United Nations, including the World Health Organization. This is the main lesson that COVID-19 tragically had to teach us: a genuine expression of faith in multilateralism in the light of the level of international cooperation in fighting the pandemic. Mr. President, climate change is a threat to humans and to their fundamental rights, particularly for vulnerable populations. The effects of global warming and the accompanying climate change are ever more visible around the world. They are dangerous and they are accelerating. Faced with the threats of climate change and environmental degradation, our action on the climate and the green economy as the foundation of our future and our development is not merely a necessity, it is an urgent duty to ensure a peaceful, sustainable future. For its part, the Democratic Republic of the Congo has made binding commitments to reduce its carbon emissions and to mitigate the effects of climate change. We are determined to do everything we can to ensure the implementation of our climate commitments through the preservation of our forests. In line with my promise and the commitment made during the 74th session of the General Assembly, the Democratic Republic of the Congo has set up a system of school gardens consisting of 1 billion trees by 2023. This program, that was adopted by my government, will begin its activities in the final quarter of this year. The aim is for it to be a major community project for ecological restoration that also provides socio-economic benefits for both urban and rural populations. We therefore equally expect that our partners will respect their financial commitments when it comes to the protection of the rainforests, in particular the Green Climate Fund, which was created to benefit the least developed countries. Mr. President, at the national level I have launched reforms in several areas, including the public finances, and improving good governance and reducing poverty. In the economy, the Democratic Republic of the Congo has made the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda and the African Union Agenda 2063 the central pillars of its development policy. Since 2016, the country has been implementing the Sustainable Development Goals with a focus on inclusion, social equity and transparency at all levels. To achieve this, my government produced the National Strategic Development Plan, which is the unifying framework for all national, provincial and sectoral policies and strategies relating to the Sustainable Development Goals, to allow the Democratic Republic of the Congo to diversify its still commodity-centred economy and to accelerate investments in infrastructure and human capital, while also promoting investment in the social sector. However, it is true that the current context, marked by COVID-19, is a real challenge, which is slowing the pace of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. My government, therefore, as I mentioned at the outset, has developed a multi-sector emergency program to reduce the impact of COVID-19, to lessen the shock caused by this public health crisis on the socio-economic environment, and to support the resumption of economic activity. Mr. President, the security situation in the east of the country remains a cause for concern. Peace has not yet been fully restored. Some residual elements of the armed groups from both within and outside the country are still active in the area and are continuing to spread death and desolation. They are attacking not only our armed forces, but also the MONUSCO peacekeepers that provide us with logistical support, as well as the civilian population. They do this with the aim of undermining the government's efforts to ensure stability in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the region. These armed groups are waging a non-conventional and asymmetric war. They act with complete disregard for the value of human life and are committing mass human rights violations and abuses, including the repeated rape and massacring of the civilian population in isolated parts of some well-known areas in the east of the country, such as the region of Beni and its surrounding area, Jugu in Ituri, and Rutshuru. What we have seen shows that these armed groups have the resources they need to continue their activities. These funds often come from the illicit exploitation of natural resources and their sale outside the Democratic Republic of the Congo through well-established networks and undoubtedly with the help of certain backers. We will not be able to neutralize these armed groups unless we eradicate their sources of support and financing from these networks and other backers. I call upon the international community to impose appropriate, targeted and effective sanctions against them. Mr. President, this general context forms the backdrop for the review of and the strategic dialogue about the transformation of the UN presence in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In anticipation of a final agreement on what MONUSCO's future in the country should look like, I should like to say that what the Democratic Republic of the Congo wants is that during this period of preparing for the mission's withdrawal, cooperation on the ground within MONUSCO units and with the FARDC should be strengthened to provide the firepower needed to protect the population and restore peace, security, and the complete authority of the state across the country's territory, including in areas where armed groups still have a presence. My determination is to put smiles back on the faces of those living in the east of the country as quickly as possible. They have been living in insecurity for more than 2 decades now. To achieve this, the Democratic Republic of the Congo is in favour of the principle of boosting the operational capacity of the Intervention Brigade, including by giving it special units that are adapted to the asymmetric warfare being forced upon it by the armed groups in the east of the country. Mr. President, improving the human rights situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is among the priorities of my government, which, since I took office, has been working to counter human rights abuses, including by combating impunity and sexual violence, access to justice for victims, improving conditions in prisons, and settling intercommunal violence, including by setting up transitional justice mechanisms. With the aim of improving the situation of human rights and social justice in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, on the 22nd of April 2019, I created an agency to prevent and combat trafficking in human beings, in addition to the National Committee for the Prevention of Torture. To bring an end to malpractice in public administration and to effectively combat corruption, fraud, and unethical practices, I created an anti-corruption agency which will help strengthen the policy of preventing corruption on the part of individuals in both the public and the private sectors. Mr. President, since the beginning of my term, I have focused the efforts of my government on promoting and protecting the rights of women and young girls. I am aware of how much this category of the population has been particularly affected by the horrors of the troubled years my country has been through. To combat all forms of sexual and gender-based violence, my country has adopted several laws and regulations and launched major initiatives. I know that these efforts notwithstanding, a great deal still needs to be done in this area. My determination to fight for the rights of women, girls and children remains steadfast. That is why my country welcomed the creation, on the 30th of October 2019, of the Global Fund for Survivors of Conflict-Related Sexual Violence. The UN should continue to ensure multilateral coordination, coherence and accountability within the system to guarantee international solidarity. That is why I reiterate my pressing call for reform of the United Nations Security Council to make it more transparent, more democratic, and more representative of the makeup of our organization. For more than a decade, we have been reiterating the glaring injustice done to the African continent in its representation on the Security Council, as well as in the various international organizations that make up the UN system. The sense of frustration caused by what is essentially indifference in the face of something so unquestionable feeds frustrations in society and the general population, which sometimes spill over into violence in many countries. Reform of the United Nations should also learn from experience in international cooperation to ensure the greater effectiveness of the agencies and funds that are involved in fighting for economic and social development. We must commit to taking concrete action to make the eradication of poverty and the reduction of inequalities irreversible, to promote social inclusion and the environment in a holistic fashion, to strengthen economic and technical cooperation, to take steps towards making development a truly shared endeavour, and to preserve international peace and security. If we do so, the global village in which we live will come to reflect international solidarity, respect for human rights, and respect for the environment, values which we all embody. Thank you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo for the statement just made.